Well, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to our deeper dive on creating and routing workflow forms within Helios. So we're going to wait just a short moment while everyone fills in the virtual webinar room here. And while we do that, we have a short, funny video for y'all.
Monitor, please display this document.
No prob, boss.
Okay, now it looks like mouse is moving around. Confirm?
Affirmative.
Alright, monitor, please track mouse and display the pointer icon accordingly.
You got it.
Mouse, where are you going now?
Sir, I'm moving over the icon panel.
Let me know if he presses anything, okay?
Of course.
Sir, he's pressing Control and P simultaneously.
Here we go.
Printer, are you there?
No.
Printer, I know you're there and I know you're on.
No, I'm not here. Leave me alone.
Okay, look, we just need to print.
Sir, he's clicked the printer icon.
Great, now you have to print the document twice. Are you happy now?
No, I don't want to. I hate printing. I hate you. I'm turning off.
You know you can't turn off without.
I'm out of ink.
You're not out of ink.
I'm out of ink.
Monitor, please display a low ink level alert.
But sir, he has plenty of ink.
Just do it, damn it!
Yes, sir.
There, that should go.
He's hitting me!
Stay calm, old friend. He'll relent soon enough.
He's pressing everything! I don't know! God, I just don't know!
Are you happy now, printer? Do you see what you've done?
Ha! That's what you get for trying to make me do work. Next time, Hey, he's trying to open my head! Ow! Oh my God! He threw my cartridge out! Help me!
Sir, maybe we should do something.
No. He did this to himself.
Oh!
Nice. Well, hopefully that's not the majority of your experiences when it comes to trying to print documents, but if you've had that happen, you're in the right place because going paperless means having to fight less with an unruly printer. So, that's better for everyone, so we're glad that you're all here today. Well, for those of you who are new to Helios lets you streamline all your paper forms into a paperless electronic process. And all those forms you have and your employees the need to submit to get those signed off can now be turned into electronic forms with e-signatures that employees and administrators can submit and improve online. So especially during these times of social distancing, Workflows in Helios is helping school staff stay safe and work remotely while getting paperwork done all online. It also helps save time and bring in reliability and transparency so you know where your forms are all at any time. Now today, we're going to take a peek at how these forms and workflows can be easily created and routed for approval within Helios. We'll see just one example today that can be easily applied to all the forms that you have, including leave requests, personnel requisitions, purchase requests, training requests, and more. We have with us today Adam Morello, our tech support manager. Adam has over 10 years experience in technology and education in various roles. He's been helping Helios users make the most of their paperless experience and solves any challenges they might have. We'll have a question and answer session at the end of Adam's deeper dive into creating and routing these electronic workflow forms. So please, at any point you have a question, type it in the Zoom on-screen feature and we'll be happy to address them all at the end. So without further ado, Adam, please take it away.
Thanks, Jim.
My pleasure.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. Like Jude said, today we're going to take a deeper dive into workflows and workflow routing in Helios. In this example today, we're going to have an example where we currently have a very cumbersome paper process requesting equipment and software from our IT department. So right now what we do is we have a piece of paper that we pass from person to person, ultimately culminating in an email to our IT department to satisfy the request. But along the way, many things can and do go wrong, and that's what we want to avoid, and that's where Helios comes in. So Helios allows us to create an orderly and efficient process, allowing us to complete that process and achieve our goals in the manner that we desire. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull up a diagram that we've created for you, and this is the life cycle of the workflow process. So the first box we see here is the form designer and create a form. So all workflows in Helios are driven by a form. Okay, this could be a PDF form that we overlay fields onto, or it can be a form that we design in Helios. But ultimately, it's form driven, just like your processes are right now. You know. But what we're going to do is convert those paper processes into an electronic one. Okay, so first is form. The next one we come down to is the form designer. And this is where we create our workflow and then create the steps associated. So the steps would be, say we have a process that gets kicked off, and then we have Department A that needs to approve it, Department B needs to approve it, and then we have Department C who needs to approve it. So that's what I'm talking about when I say steps. It's the steps of who are the approvers, okay? The next step we have here is the workflow designer, and then that's the approval criteria. So we have the departments that need to approve it, but who in the department is actually going to be doing the approval? So we have, you know, Department A, but who inside of Department A is going to say, yes, this is good to go. So after that, the next thing we have to do is we got to start the workflow. Okay, once we start the workflow, we move over here to the workflow dashboard, and this is where we manage and approve the process in Helios. Okay, so this is where we would see who's going to approve it at each department, and we get to manage and see where it is at which step of the process. And once we get all the way through that, we complete the workflow. And this is the life cycle. Okay, so let's get started off, and we'll start with step one, which is the form designer. We need to create a form. So let's get back over to Helios. In order to do that, we need to come over here to admin, and we come down to the form designer. Okay, so just like I said before, all workflows are driven by forms in Helios. Today we're going to be focusing on workflows in specific, but if you have any questions on how to create forms in Helios, we've had a previous deeper dive on that. So if you have questions on how to dive a little bit deeper into creating forms themselves in Helios, reach out to Jim or Brian, and they can help you with getting that webinar. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a new form today. Like I said, it's a technology request. Go, and then the name is going to be technology request as well. And we're going to click save. Okay, now that that's saved, let's design this form. Okay, so like I said before, forms can be driven by a PDF form, which we would upload here, and then we would overlay fields on top of that PDF. But for today, what we're going to do is we're just going to create a custom form in Helios, just adding fields straight to the screen. So let's get going, adding that, creating that form. So let's add our first field. This is going to be a radio button field, and this is going to be the request type. Okay, so now we did that. I'm gonna add some buttons down here. Actually, I want the direction to be horizontal. And the first one is going to be a new. Next one is a replace. Need a repair. And then I also want a change. Cool. Awesome, that looks good. Add and close that field. Perfect, one field down. Okay, the next one is going to be the request reason. So we're gonna add another one. This is going to be a text box and request reason. There we go. I'm gonna add one more field, a few more fields, I mean. It's going to be the phone number. Oops. There we go, contact phone. Add that one. Okay, request item. What are they requesting? We're gonna add another field. This is going to be a drop down. I only want them to be able to select specific items from a list. Request item, there we go. Let's add some items to this drop-down list. So the first one's going to be an email. And we're going to do a cell phone, desk phone, iPad or Chromebook, laptop, and then a PC. Okay, cool. That looks good. Add and close that. And then the last field is going to be the request description. And I'm going to make this a multi-text field. Request description, add and close. There we go. That's our form. So let's save that. Always make sure to save. Let's preview the form, make sure it looks good. Perfect. That's exactly what I want it to look like. Okay. So let's Perfect. Now that's step one. That's done. So let's move on. Let's go back to the lifecycle process. Let's look and see. Okay, so we've created the form. So next thing we need to do is get over to the workflow designer and create the workflow and the steps. So let's get here. And to get to the workflow designer, we come to admin and then workflow designer. Okay. So you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, this is our workflow designer menu. This contains all of the current workflows in Helios. These are the names of those workflows. Then we have two other columns. We have employee access, and then we have onboarding, and we'll get to talking about that here in a second. We also have this managed workflow approved criteria. We're going to get to that in a second as well. But what we want to do now is we want to add a new workflow. So the first thing is workflow name, self-explanatory. We're going to name this technology request. Perfect. Okay, so employee access is the next one. So this checkbox determines whether this workflow can be kicked off from the employee portal. So you may have a process where you need employees to be able to have access to it, like a technology request. All employees have technology, so this is going to need employee access. But maybe you have a different process that you don't want all of your employees, all of your staff, all of your teachers, everybody to have access to it, and you only want it to be HR portal admins or staff that you want to be able to kick this off. And in that case, you would not check this. You wouldn't want employees to have access to it. So that's what this checkbox does. The next one is onboarding type, and this checkbox indicates whether the workflow is of the onboarding type. And if it is, then it can be kicked off from the onboarding designer, because onboarding is ultimately a workflow and it's driven by a workflow. So if you take a look over here at this menu, you can see we have an employee onboarding that has a checkbox here. And then we also have volunteer registration. That's kind of like an onboarding thing when you have a volunteer registering. So that has this checked as well. But for a technology request, it's not of the onboarding type, so we're going to leave that unchecked. Okay, so the next section contains the hide fields and workflow checkboxes. These checkboxes correspond to built-in workflow fields that can be shown or hidden depending on if the checkboxes are checked or not. So let's take a look at what these checkboxes actually correspond to. I have another screen open with a workflow, and I'm going to do a split screen so we can actually take a look at these side by side. Okay. So the first checkbox here is hours, rate, and amounts, okay? And this is personnel related. So maybe you have a workflow process where you have to know exactly how many hours are gonna be being approved for, what's the rate, and what are the total amount of hours, okay? And in that case, that's why you would have this unchecked. So if it's checked, that means it's hidden. If it's unchecked, that means it's available. And this is what that looks like right here. Okay, and these are already built in for you. So when you would leave this unchecked, this automatically comes into your workflow. The next one is funding. So you might have a paper process. This is the funding one. So you might have a paper process where you have a lot of funding codes that you need to know. The funding codes are associated with that workflow process. So that's what this looks like here. Okay, so you can see we have the fund codes. These are all your SACSs, resource, goal, function. Then down here we have percentage. And you can absolutely add as many of these as you want, okay? Once you do is you would just save it, and then a new line would pop up, and then you can add as many funding codes as you'd like. The next one is additional employees, and that's here, okay? So the additional employees, say you have a workflow process where you have a teacher or some staff that is wanting to go on a field trip, okay? And they're not the only staff that's going on that field trip. And so you need to attach some other employees to the workflow process. So one employee would kick off the process, then they could come down here and add some new staff to the workflow process. And so then more than one employee would be attached to it, and that's what this additional employees checkbox would do. The next one is the budget code. That's here. So if you need the budget code for any reason, you would leave this unchecked. You have your pay periods. So if you have a workflow that is for a specific period of time, then you could always leave this unchecked, and then you could say, oh, here's the start date we can add in, here's the end date. You can put it in for the entire school year, or you can select which pay period that it's going to be applicable for. Oh, and there's also this to be paid all year as well, this checkbox. So that's what this one does. The document attachments. This is a great one. So a lot of processes are going to have document attachments. Even this technology request, they might need to take a screenshot and to show me exactly, you know, what is the issue with your piece of technology that you're requesting a change or a new or whatever for. So actually, I forgot to check these off. So for these ones, I want to hide these. And then I'm going to leave this one available. Then we have job assignment and position box. Those ones are up here at the top of the screen. So you see this job assignment. So what you do is you'd enter an employee name, and then it will bring up the applicable job assignments for that employee. So whatever assignments they have in Helios, they'll populate this drop-down list. And so I'm going to leave this unchecked for this technology request because maybe they have different technology for their for each different job that they have, and maybe they're making a request for a specific job. And then down here you have the position only for position control. That's what this text box is. But for this request, I do not need that. So I'm going to check this. So these are all the ones that I'm hiding. And then I'm going to leave document attachments and job assignments available. Okay, cool, perfect. So this next section right here, this required fields in workflow, these checkboxes correspond to these fields up here in this previous section. But instead of determining whether they're visible or not, this determines whether the fields are required. So if we were to check this box, that means that the hour, rate, and amount fields are going to be required fields. Okay, and the same goes for funding. That means like if you have a process where you absolutely need funding to be put in, it's not going to get approved unless it has its funding codes. That's where you would check this box and make these required. And then it would make these fields here required. Okay, cool. So let's keep moving on. So the next box is the form attached with this workflow. And like I said, all workflows are form driven. So let's click on this and let's grab, oh, you know what, let me come back to full screen. There we go. So this is the form attachment workflow. So we'll come here and we'll get that technology request form we just created. There it is. Perfect. So now, oh, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. My screen refreshed. Oh, let me add these in real quick. One employee access. There we go. I don't want anything required, and then I want technology request. Cool. Okay. So now that we have this form attached, so now this form is going to be driving this workflow process, and that's what we do when we select our form. So the next box here is the enable checkbox. And what this checkbox does is it makes this workflow available for use if checked and unavailable for use if unchecked. So this is a really nice feature because there's a good possibility that when you're adding a new workflow, other staff within your district could be currently using the workflow module. While leaving this box unchecked, you can safely work on adding a new workflow without the possibility of another staff accidentally kicking it off before it's complete. So in our environment right now, I know nobody else is working, so I'm just going to leave it enabled even though I'm not completed yet. But say you were actively using your workflow module, you could leave this unchecked while you finish setting up your entire workflow process. I'm going to leave this checked. And then these last three fields down here, these are used by technical administrators, so we recommend that you leave these blank. And let's click save. So now we click save, we can see that it pops up over here. Okay, cool. So now that we've completed our main configurations for this workflow, the next thing we need to do is dive into the routing process and the steps of that workflow. So what we want to do is we want to come down here and click this edit steps button. So you see when we say we also got this duplicate this workflow. So say you have two processes that are very similar, that have the same amount of steps, okay, the same exact steps, routing and everything. There's just a few tweaks here and there. You can always duplicate the process to save yourself some time. And that's why we have this button here. But we don't have our steps set up yet. So we're going to come over here and we're going to click edit steps. Okay, cool. So on this screen, we see we have this window here. This is going to hold all of our steps, and then we have a lot of fields over here, okay? So each step we're going to create corresponds to an approver or a set of approvers who will have the ability to verify the accuracy and legitimacy of the workflow data at their point of the process. So once the process is kicked off, each approver will be notified by email when it is their turn to approve the workflow to keep the process moving. Once everybody is satisfied and approves the workflow, the process completes and the request has been completed. So we need to add some steps to this workflow process, and I've created a sheet, a little cheat sheet to let me know exactly what the steps are for this technology process. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so we can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 steps in this process, and then this kind of determines who our approvers are. Okay, so the first one is going to be the originator step, and so let's get over there and add this, and then we'll discuss what each box, what these fields look like, and what they correspond to. Okay, cool. So the first one is going to be originator. Perfect, it's the name. Self-explanatory. Okay, now the next checkbox is the final step. This checkbox should only be selected for the final step. This is how the workflow knows that it has completed. So when it gets to that step of the process and it reaches the final step, it knows, okay, it's been approved at this step, process has been completed, and that would be reflected in the workflow dashboard. Okay, so the originator step is not the final step, so we're not going to check that for this one. The next one is the notification step only. So this checkbox allows us to create a step that wouldn't require anybody to approve anything, but would rather send out a notification to inform them that the workflow has completed. So this type of step is only used after the final step. So a good example of this is onboarding. Okay, so you have your HR and maybe a few other departments that are actively involved in the approving of a new hire. Okay, but then you might have some other departments that they don't really have a say in who gets hired in your district, but once someone does get hired, they need to be notified. You know, IT might be a good example for this. You know, maybe in your district, the IT department doesn't have any say in who's getting hired, but once they do get hired, they have to get a laptop or they have to get an email set up. And so that's where you would use a notification step, and it would let them know, hey, we hired somebody, you need to do what you need to do, but just wanted to let you know. Notification only. So originator step is not that. So we're going to leave that unchecked. Then we have an enable checkbox. This is kind of like I just said before. So if this is checked, this means that the step is enabled. If it's unchecked, that means that the step is disabled and it will not place any role. It won't be hit during the approval process. Okay, so these next 4 drop-down boxes and the approval role box here. So these 4. And then this one, correspond to who will be approving the workflow process. And we have approver 1, 2, and 3, and these correspond directly to your user setup in your Helios environment. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So right here is our user access screen. Okay, to get to this, you would go to admin, and then you would come down to user access. And what this is this is everybody who's configured in your Helios environment. And these are all your available approvers, okay? If we come back over to this other screen and we click on this dropdown, we can see that all of these names correspond to who we see over here in this window, okay? So if you need someone to be an approver, they need to be added to user access, okay? Now, if you have any questions on user access, if you're a current user or a current customer and you have some questions, we have this great help portal up here. So if I can click on this, this has a lot of users guides and documents. If we come down here, we have a nice user access document for you. So if you have any questions on how to set up user access, I would check out the help portal and click on this document, and it can help you get that set up. So let's come back over here. Okay, so these 3. Okay, so I'm talking about these ones right here, approver 1, 2, and 3. So if you want an approver, if you want someone to be an approver all the time, you're going to want to use these, and it corresponds to that step. Now, originator is a little bit different, but that's what these steps are. So for this step, I want this person to approve every time. Okay, that's why you would select someone here. You have the approval type here, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but this kind of routes based off of certain criteria. So if I click on this, we can see that we have some groups already set up. I'm going to show you how to set up these groups in a little bit, but if you wanted it to route based off of some criteria to a different approver, that's when you use this approval type dropdown. The last one is the approval roles. So if you take a look at these correspond to our user accesses again. So if you see our predefined roles, we have district admin, HR staff, all of these roles you see here, those are the same roles that you see in here. Okay, so maybe you have a process where anybody in HR can approve it. Okay, at that step of the process, I don't care who it is, anybody in HR can do it. Anybody with that user access can approve this, and that's when you would come down here and check that. Okay, but for originator, we need everybody to be able to kick this off. So we're going to keep it as all. Okay, so we have these next 2 boxes, query to run on step approval and query to run on step rejection. These again are used by technical administrators, so we recommend to leave these blank. The next thing we have here are the editability of sections. I'm sorry, excuse me. So when these are checked, depending on which step you're at, if these are checked, this means that you can edit these fields in the workflow. So you can see here, edit entire workflow. So maybe you don't want somebody to edit something. So maybe the originator kicks it off, and instead of having the next step be able to edit something, You don't want them to be able to edit anything. They would have to reject it back if we needed to make any changes. And then that's when you would leave all of these unchecked. Okay, for the originator step, however, it defaults that everything's editable because they're the one that's going to be actually filling out the form. Okay. And then the next two are email notification body and email notification query. Again, these are for technical administrators, so we recommend we leave these blank. Okay, cool. So let's hit save. As you can see, once we hit save, now the step shows up over here. Okay. So now let's set up our other steps. So what I like to do is I like to create all of my steps. Okay, make sure those are all good to go. Then I go over and do my approval criteria, make sure I get those all set up the way I like it, and then I come back and I apply those to the steps. It's just the easiest way for me. It keeps everything straight, and it seems to be the most efficient way for me. Now, to each his own, but that's how I'm going to show you guys how to do it today. But if you guys have a different way that you like to do it, feel free. Okay, so let's come back over and see. Okay, so I have originator, supervisor, principal, department head, IT, and finance. So let's add these steps. So I'm going to add new, supervisor. Okay, and like I said, I'm not filling out any of this information yet. I'm just adding in the steps. Add new, this is going to be IT. This last one is finance. Okay, awesome. Now all of our steps are created. Now we need to decide who are the approvers for each of these steps. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to workflow design. And we're going to go into this button like I mentioned before, manage workflow approval criteria. Okay, so we're going to click on this. This brings us to a new screen. And before I get into how we set up these criteria, let's just take a look at all the components of the screen. So if we look up here, we have our search box, okay, and it has a lot of drop downs that we can select some fields from. And then we also have this menu here. Okay, so this menu contains all of our workflow approval criteria that we already have configured in Helios. Okay, now depending on how many workflow processes you have, how large your district is, you might have a lot of criteria already set up in your environment. And maybe you need to update something. Maybe somebody has left the district and you need to reroute it to somebody else. You know, there could be a lot of reasons. Maybe you close down a school site and you need to update something. And you have, you know, a couple hundred criteria in here, and it's going to be hard to find. That's where these search boxes come in. So you could select it like, hey, I know it's for this workflow type, approval type, location, employee type, and then you could search for it, and then it's going to show you which criteria apply to whatever you put up here in the search criteria, and it's just going to make your editing of existing criteria a lot easier. Okay, and like I said down here, this is showing us all of the criteria. Okay, so let's add some criteria. So we're going to go to add new. Okay, and then let's come back over to our cheat sheet and see. Okay, so for who approves, so originator, we're good on that one, but the next one is supervisor. So supervisor of the employee. Okay, let's come back over here. Now, supervisor is a little bit different, okay? The supervisor, actually, you know what, before I get into that, let's talk about what all these fields do. Okay, so workflow approval type. This is going to be the name of your criteria group. Okay, in order to create a cohesive group, you must make sure to spell out the name exactly the same way each time, or consequently, you're going to be creating a different group, and that's not going to bode well for routing. So if you look over here, you can see we have location, and this is spelled the same each time, so this is all one group. This is all one routing group. Okay, HR is a routing group, hardware is a routing group, and in order to add something new to that group, we need to spell location exactly the same. Okay, so that's what this does. This is creating your groups. The next one is workflow type, and this dropdown lets us specify a specific workflow to apply the criteria to. Okay, so this could be used if maybe you have a specific routing process for a specific workflow. Okay, and that's the only workflow that these criteria groups are going to apply to. Okay, so maybe you would have like location, and then you have location something special, you know, location technology request. I'm just throwing that out there, but that means that you're only going to use it for the technology requests, okay? And that's where it's only going to be available. So that's what workflow type does. It makes a criteria group specific to the workflow. For technology, we're not going to do that. This is a standard one, so we're not going to have that checked. So all of these other fields here specify the criteria that you're creating, other than these here, these approvers, and we'll get those in a second. But these two, location, location code, and then all of these fields down here specify the type of criteria and how you're going to route the approval process. So the first one's location. So these are connected to your configured locations in Helios. So if you want to route your process based off location, you can select something here, or location code. Come down here, here's your funding code. So maybe based off a certain resource code, one staff member approves it, and then based off another one, another staff member approves it. And these are all your SACS codes. So if you do your routing based off of that, you can absolutely do that in Helios. We have employee type. Maybe somebody does certificate employee, somebody does classified, somebody else does volunteer. You can absolutely make your criteria based off of that. We also have job class, job category. We have permanency, team, onboarding packet type. This is great. So a lot of HR groups, certain people take care of like certificate substitutes, another one take care of certificated employees, okay? And this is a great way that you can do your routing based off of that. And then there's these ones, form field and form field response. This is a really cool one. So if we click on this, this brings up all of the forms that we have created in our Helios environment. So if we come down to T, there we go. We can see all these fields. So we have all of our technology request fields. These are the fields we just created. So maybe you have somebody who handles all of the email requests, and then you have somebody else who handles all of the PC requests. So you could absolutely click on this and then say the form field is going to be email. And then based off of when the person fills out that form, if they select the email checkbox, it's going to route to the approver based off of the form field answer, which is a really cool feature, okay? It makes it completely customizable by you guys. You guys can do whatever you would like when you're trying to route these processes, because you are the ones who decide which forms go, which fields go in your forms. So that's a really cool one. But for now, I'm not going to do that. And then you have your exclusion criteria. So this means I want it to route to this person except when it's this location. So if I did that, I want it to always go to this person except when it's Marshall High School, okay? And that's what exclusion means. Everybody but, or every time but this time, okay? And you can do that for job class, funding code. Here's all your SACS codes again. So those are the exclusion criteria. Okay, so now that we went over what these fields are, let's take a look at this again because I forgot where we're at. Okay, so supervisor, that's the first one we need to set up. Now supervisor is a special one, and you can see it's already set up in here. So if you are a current user of Helios, you should have this already in your environment, but if you didn't, let's click on this. You see it's a very simple one. None of these get filled out, okay? And then the keyword up here for the criteria is supervisor, spelled just like this. And what this does is it routes to the supervisor of the employee. So on their employee detail screen in Helios, there's a field that you can select who the supervisor is. And when you use this keyword, supervisor, it's gonna route to that person for approval for that step. So supervisor is very easy to do. It's already set up for us in Helios, so that one's good to go. Let's come back over here. So the next one is principal department head, and this is location based. So we want to come over here and add new. We're going to do principal department head. Okay, and now I'm going to copy this because I want to make sure I spell this the exact same each time. So I'm not going to fill out the workflow type, but I do want to make this location based. So let's come over here. We're going to select the first location. And then, okay, so for this school site, who is going to be our approver? Okay. And so I'm going to come down here. Like I said before, these are connected to your user access. So if for some reason you didn't see the approver you want, you'd have to go over to admin, user access, and set them up in Helios. Okay, but the first one is going to be Adam, is the approver for Frank L. Walton. Okay, and then I don't want to route based off of everything else, off of anything else. So I'm going to click save. Once we click save, we can see it shows up over here. Now let's add another one. There we go, copy and paste it in. Next location, Kennedy Middle School. And for this one, it's going to be Brian. And we're gonna save. Let's do another one. Principal department head, spelled the same. Next location, Lincoln Elementary. So as you can see, I'm just going down the list because this is based off of location. And then I'm just picking the appropriate approvers for each one. Okay, so when it gets to this time, when it gets to this step that I'm going to assign this to, it's going to look at the location, and then it's going to route to the correct person. So that's what you're doing here when you're setting up your approval criteria. You're setting up the routing, okay? So that's good for that one. Let's come back over here. So for the IT, so IT staff based off of certificated and classified employee type, but then the director gene is always an approver. Okay, cool. So when someone is always going to be an approver, you don't need to set them up in here. And I'll show you what I mean in a second, but this is based off of how you're gonna route. You're routing off of some specific criteria, but when someone's always an approver, we want to hard code that person into the workflow step itself. And I'll show you what I mean, but let's set up the routing process. So we're gonna add a new, and name this IT. And then I need it off of okay, so certificated employee type. And then the approver for that one is going to be, it's John. There we go, and we're gonna click save. There we go, popped up. So let's add one more. IT. Employee type is classified. And that is Jim. Cool. Let's click save. Okay. Cool, let me check this one more time. We got finance. This is a notification only step going to the director each time, so I don't need to set up any criteria for that. Okay, cool. So it looks like we're complete. Set up all of our criteria. So let's get over back to the workflow designer and let's apply these criteria we just created. Come down here, go to workflow design. We're going to come back into our technology requests. We're going to edit our steps. Let's apply these. Okay, so we're good to go for originator. Next one is supervisor. So we wanted to route to the employee supervisor. So that's where we come over here and we look at our approval types. So you can see I just added IT and principal department head. So you can see they showed up over here in our approval type list. Okay, so that's how it works. So once you create it in the approval criteria, it's going to show up over here in the approval type. So for this one, we're going to click the supervisor keyword, and that's all we need to do. And we're going to click save. So now that step's going to route to the supervisor. So principal department head. This was the one that's routing based off location. We come over here and we select principal department head. And now when it gets to this step, it's going to look at the location of the employee that this is the workflow is for, and then it's going to route to them based off their location because we already set it up. So then we're going to save this. And then IT. Okay, so we come over here and we're going to select IT. Now IT was a little bit different because we need Gene, the director, to always be able to approve it as well. Okay, so that's when we come over here and we hard code this right in. So we select Gene from this drop down. Okay, and what this means is when it gets to this step, Gene is always going to be notified that, hey, Gene, this process, this workflow is getting going. The ball's in your court. You can always approve it. Okay, now it's also going to route based off of the type of the employee. Okay, so if the employee is certificated, it's going to go to Jim. If it's classified, it's going to go to John. And then either one of them is going to be approver, but also Gene is always going to get it. And if Gene approves it, then the process moves through. If Jim or John approves it, the process moves through. But Gene will always get a notification. Where here it's going to route based off that criteria that we set up previously. Okay, so that's how that works. Oh, and you know what? I forgot one thing. IT is the final step. So we're going to come over here and we're going to check this box. Final step. Then we see that that shows up over here. So then we have the last one, which is finance. And this is a notification step only, I believe. Yep, notify only. We want to notify the director. So I'm going to check this. It's after the final step. Okay, and then we need to select the director from here, which is George. Click save. Okay. That's it. Okay, we created a workflow process. Okay, there's a lot of pieces and parts there. Okay, and it's a little bit complicated, but now that it's set up, it's gonna do all the work for you. Okay, it's gonna route to the appropriate people. You can use those approval criteria that we set up for other workflows, and that's what this looks like. Okay, so now that we've created this, now that our tedious paper manual process is gone. Okay, now everything's electronic in Helios. We created our form. Everything looks good. So now that we created it, let's kick off this process. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to come over to our workflows dashboard. Okay, So we're going to start a new workflow process. And we're going to come down here. We see our technology request. We're going to start the workflow. Okay, cool. So we're going to add an employee. Okay, we have the location. We're going to do Frank L. Walton. We're going to see all of his job assignments load in here, like I said. And then we're going to do a new one. Request reason, I need a phone. Contact phone number. Okay, that doesn't look right, but that's a possibility. You might get that one time. Let's go to the request item. This is going to be a cell phone, and I am a new employee, and I need a cell phone. Okay, and then we're going to click submit. Oh, you can also see if you needed to attach a document, you could do that. Let's click submit. Okay, perfect. So now you can see down here, this is the approval process steps. You can see that the step was the originator. It was signed by me, Helios support. This is the date and time. Here's the action. Okay. So what we could do is let's go look at another one because this is obviously routed. This is waiting on the supervisor. I'm obviously not the supervisor for Daryl, but I have another one already set up, and let's go take a look at what that looks like. Let's come back to our workflows. Let's review this one. Okay, cool. So this is a device request. It looks very similar to the one we were just in. And so you can kind of see the whole routing process here. So it went from the originator, then it went down to the supervisor. The principal said, hey, everything was good. The principal department head, it went to them, they approved it. And you can see they have some comments in here. So you look down here and we have our approval comments, okay? So this is saying, hey, you know, I just want to make a little comment to say why I'm approving it, you know, and then Helios will track all of that for you, okay? Now, there's also this right here, redirect workflow for approval, redirect workflow for approval to this user, okay? And you can see this happened right here, redirect to user Helios support, okay? So say somebody is not in. Any district admin can come in and they can redirect it to somebody else. So in order to keep the workflow processes going, you might need to redirect. But normally, you know, everybody's in the office and it directs, routes properly, you know, but maybe you just need to redirect it. It's just like a one-off thing, and you can always use that feature here. Now, if we look at the bottom here, because I'm the approver for this step, we have these buttons. We have the approve button, pretty straightforward. Hey, everything looks good. I'm going to approve it. The next one is approve and next. And what this one is it approves it, but then it will look at your workflow dashboard. So it'll go, and then once you click approve, it's going to bring up the next workflow that you have to approve. So say you have a lot of approvals in your inbox, or a lot of workflows in your inbox that you need to approve. You can use this approve and next button, and it's just going to keep opening them. You can review them, and it makes everything seamless, and it saves a lot of time, a lot of less button clicks, and you can just go through and check on everything, okay? But the important one here that we want to go over is the reject button. Okay, so let's click this reject button. Okay, so if we take a look at this, okay, so we have these reject reasons. Okay, these are configurable in Helios. Let me see if I have a window. Okay, so if you wanted to modify those reject reasons, you come over here to admin, and this is for your district admin. You would go to drop down edits. Come down to the bottom and workflow reject reasons. And then you see these reasons are here, okay? This is where this corresponds to. So completely customizable. Say you want a lot of different reasons, you know, be a little bit more specific. You can absolutely add in any reasons that you'd like, okay? And then they would be available here to select from. For this one, we would say incorrect data provided, okay? Then there's these three, and these are very important. These are your routing options, okay? So the first one here is send back to step below. Okay, so say I wanted to send this back to the originator step. Okay, when I use this button, okay, it's going to send back to the originator, and then it's going to come back to me afterwards. Okay, say the originator needed to fix something that I didn't like, but it's not going to go back to the supervisor. It's not going to go back to the principal department head. It's going to come right back to me. Okay, because they've already approved it. They're happy with the request, but I'm the one that's unsatisfied. So that's when I would use this one. Okay. The next one is reject and start over. You would use this one if maybe the person who's requesting something has no reason to be kicking off this workflow in the first place. You're like, hey, I don't know what this request is. You should not be requesting for this. And so reject is like a no way. Like you're just going to reject it, and it's going to kill the actual process. It's going to be dead in its tracks. Okay, reject it, no moving forward. Okay. Then the next one we have here is send back and reroute. And what this one is kind of like try again. Okay, so if I selected this one, okay, then it's going to go back to the originator because that's the step I'm sending it to. Okay, and then it's going to reroute because maybe there's some criteria that need to be changed and the routing process might change. Okay, maybe the location was wrong. You can see here we have the principal department head. That goes off a location. Okay, so we need to send back and reroute because the approvers might actually change who's going to approve that specific step. So that's what these three do. So we have fix this. This is how I think of it. Send back to step below, fix this little issue, okay? The next one is reject and start over, which is no way, not happening. And then we have this one, send back and reroute, which is try again, okay? Go through all the steps and try again, okay? And that's what it is. Then you can absolutely add in some comments here when you're gonna reject something, okay? And then those will absolutely show up down here, okay? So, that's what this looks like, and that's kind of the whole workflow process. Now, there's one more thing I want to show you before we finish up, and there can be a lot of workflows going on, and in order to stay on top of it, Helios actually provides you with a lot of canned reports on workflows. So if you wanted to see those, you would come over to reports, click on reports here, and you can search workflows. Okay, and we actually have some reports already built in for you. This can help you by doing reports. It can help you, see which workflows are held up. Which ones have gotten approved recently. You can, and if you needed some different reports that aren't the ones that are canned for you, you can absolutely create your own reports by coming here to ad hoc reports and queries, and this lets you develop your own reports in Helios. Now, we actually did a deeper dive previously on reports as well. So if you have some questions on how to build your own reports, I would contact Jim and Brian, and they can redirect you to that workflow, and then they can show you how to create your own custom reports in Helios. But you know what, that's about it for the day. We accomplished a lot. We created a new form, we created a new workflow process, we created some new criteria, and it's a little bit hard. Workflows are a little bit tough, but now we get to really reap the benefits of Helios, because now the paper process is done, and now the routing process is done for you, and it routes to whoever you want automatically, and it's just a really, really cool thing doing workflows in Helios. But this concludes my webinar for today, so thank you so much for your time. I hope you guys found this really informative, and thanks again. And Jim, I'm going to turn it back to you for Q&A.
All right, fantastic. Wow, Adam, thank you so much for doing all of that. It's a lot of information, like you said.
There's a lot.
Yeah. So thank you. I mean, ultimately, the goal is so that our Helios users are the absolute pros at using this, and it's just saving so much time. So obviously you can see that, like you mentioned, takes a bit to set it all up, but once it's set up, it does all the work automatically for you, and you can do so much of that within Helios. So again, thank you, Adam, for showing us just everything today when it comes to the workflows. And we know that there's so much more that goes into K-12 HR and business than just simply the workflows. Like we can see here in this is our paperless employee life cycle. If you are looking to do any of these areas paperlessly, you absolutely want to check out heliosed.com. You can visit here. You can read about our different offerings, our solutions, including our brand new mobile app, which I'll mention that here in just a moment. You can read our different success stories from Helios users. And right here, you can connect with us. You can check out our videos on YouTube and Vimeo, our savings calculator, which if you're exploring going paperless, you absolutely want to check out that savings calculator. It takes about 2 minutes to do, and you'll put in that information and it will generate for you just how much money you can expect to save by going paperless. So an incredible tool for anyone who's looking into going paperless for all their systems. And webinar sign up right here. That'll bring us to this page. We have our upcoming webinars. You can sign up right here for a personalized demo as well. And our next webinar is going to be on Tuesday, July 28th, and that's going to be funding for charters in COVID. Oh my. So if you are part of any of the great charter schools in our nation who have been affected by the unforeseen funding decreases, you're going to want to absolutely attend this webinar. And like I mentioned, the last webinar, we announced our brand new Helios mobile app. It's finally here. And this slide shows you, in a nutshell, everything that it does for your employees, your substitutes, and your new hires. So we're really excited that your staff will be able to save even more time thanks to this app. And if you have questions, please, like the bottom of the slide here mentions, email me, jim@heliosed.com. And you can see a short video showcasing the look and the feel of the app at heliosed.com/app. And you can download it at the App Store and Google Play. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over here to Adam. We're going to do our Q&A. So whatever questions you have, please go ahead and type them in the Zoom Ask a Question button below, and we'll go ahead. We'll answer those questions. So our very first question, let's see here, I have is there a limit to the amount of workflow forms I can have?
Oh, no, absolutely not. No, every district is different. Everybody has, a different amount of processes, and Helios doesn't restrict you at all on how many you have. So no, that is not a concern. Don't worry about it at all.
Gotcha. Okay, cool, sweet, sounds good. Can multiple admin modify the flow of all the workflows?
So if you remember during the deeper dive, we touched upon the user access. So you go to admin, then you go to your user access. And when you set up your user access, that's going to determine who can touch the process. So who has, reign over making those modifications. So no, not all admin can, but it's up to you to decide who you want to be able to, and Helios can accommodate that.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, cool. Thank you for the clarification. And can employees view workflows on the mobile app?
The mobile app does have some workflow capabilities. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. And if you're interested in that, I would contact somebody to get a demo.
Okay, cool, perfect, sounds good. Another question here: can an admin see the progress of any workflow even when it is not on their step? I want to be able to see if my staff is sitting on a workflow for too long. How can I do that? Great question, Rachel. What do we have to say there, Adam?
Absolutely. If you're a district admin, you can absolutely see everything. Okay. And district admins kind of have full reign of the system. And so if you want to see what's going on, you can absolutely go through the workflow dashboard. There's a button that you click there, and you can click all, and you can see all of the workflows that are in progress, and you can actually see the ones that have been completed and approved as well. And then I'd also go back to reports. So to make it even a little bit easier, you can always use one of the reports that we have created in Helios for you, or you can create your own report, and then it can really nail down exactly what you want to see each time. So yes, you can, and district admins can.
Sweet. Awesome. A lot of functionality within Helios.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Awesome. Perfect. Well, there's no more questions. Adam, thank you so much for all of this. That does it for us here today. So please, folks, stay connected with us on heliosed.com. Sign up for future webinars, request a personalized demo, check out that savings calculator as well, and just let us know how we can best serve you to make your K-12 HR lives easier. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone.